Nazis had their own party flag, the swastika, on the white circle with the red background. And that was such a powerful symbol. And Hitler himself was just such a talented designer. And I shouldn't put that in one sentence, but it's the truth. It's like everything was in lockstep. Everything like was following the brand guidelines to a T. There was nothing out of step. So it just was this incredible force, visual identity.
Welcome to Citizen Rebel, the podcast for founders, small business owners, and bold influencers who refuse to stay silent.
These are the stories of entrepreneurs and creators risking everything to speak up, to stand out, and to stand for something.
And for those of us feeling unsure of how to react or what to say and do, this is a place where we can figure it out together.
This is Citizen Rebel, stories of brands taking a stand. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Citizen Rebel. Today, we have a show that is going to unpack an extremely controversial subject. And yeah, I think you're all going to be as riveted as we are on this topic, which is the American flag, our symbol of democracy, liberty, and justice for all, and what has happened to that symbol over the more recent years. And yeah, so before we dive into that, though, I want to say thank you to everybody who's listened to the show. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's been awesome. It's been really cool to see how people have been embracing it and connecting with it. So yeah, huge thanks.
Yeah, we have had over 200 downloads, and yeah, thanks for joining us. We're really excited that you're here and want to keep it going. So to that end, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Actually really excited to get into this. You can see I'm wearing my star-spangled, what is this, a blazer? Yeah.
Yeah, you've
4th of
got an
July coming up,
American.
so I dug that one out of storage.
Yeah, for anybody who's listening, Chris is wearing an American flag blazer. It is incredible. He's got the stripes on one side and the stars on the other. It's
Yeah,
very
so that's
cool.
my big news. How you doing, Elena?
I'm doing well. It is almost the 4th of July, which is exciting and has me in I think the whole country just kind of on edge right now at this moment. So you'll be hearing this hopefully right around there as well, and we're rooting for everybody. That's how. Yeah, I'm doing great though. Thanks for asking. Okay, so we are, Chris and I are brand strategists. Chris is a designer on that side. So for anyone who doesn't know exactly what we do, my work is more in bringing a story to life through copy and content, and how we tell that brand's story out in the world. And Chris is more in the design of the brand and how it looks and feels.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
the idea, the expression of Elena's the verbal side and I am the visual side, and we, extract out what's in a company and then figure out ways to express it, through visuals.
Right. And they call it identity design in particular when you're designing a new brand. And so Chris has this education in design and art theory and everything. And behind you, is that the art from your grandfather's art?
Yes. So right behind me is a painting from my grandfather. My grandfather was one of the founders of the Department for Design here in Columbus, Ohio, at Ohio State. And this is a painting from my best friend, who passed away 2 years ago, but he was like the real deal artist. So art just runs through everything I've ever done.
All right. And you were born and raised in Germany.
Yes. So yeah, I didn't move to this country until I was 23. So I did spend, significant amount, all my childhood, adolescence, college, all of that in Germany. That's right.
So I think it's very unique that Chris is bringing to us today his experience as a designer plus his experience not being raised in the United States. So the first question that I want to dive into with you, Chris, is when you think of the American flag, what does it mean to you?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up in Germany and with an American mother. And I went over to visit. And to me, this country was always, when I was a child, it was always about it's the cool place where you want to be. Like at that point, still all popular media, popular culture was fed into Germany. So we got everything like 1 or 2 years late, and it was the idea that you could go, that I would be able to go over there, and it felt very forward thinking. It felt very, on top of the world. And all the movies, I wanted to, when you see the flag itself, like that's what you would see in the movies, and all the 90s action flicks that I would watch and stuff like that. So very much a very reductive point of view as a child, but positive. And I'd moved to this country for a reason, right? I do love living here, and I want to make sure I always talk about being from Germany, but it's not like I want to move back there. I don't. I really do like it here. There's so many great things. So it does represent something really positive.
It's interesting because I wonder if most Americans realize how much our pop culture represents our country and how much it is infused across the world,
Yeah,
And you did use the word cool, which is really interesting because um, that is part of the American brand, absolutely, that we are the cool kid on the block fighting for what's right in the
right.
world.
Yeah.
That's
I
how
mean,
I
if you look,
perceive it.
the way you would think of, the idealized state of the United States, like in the 80s and 90s, right? Which is just right post Cold War. So it would be like mid 90s, maybe. That's kind of what I remember. Because I remember when the wall came down. Well, I was very young. I remember my cartoons weren't on because David Hasselhoff was, talking in Berlin or something about, the end of socialism. And so yeah, that era, America was really, you know, really something people looked up to and wanted to
Right. We
emulate and
had
aspire to.
Baywatch going
Exactly.
on. We had Bruce Springsteen. When I think of the American flag, I'm sure I've got Bruce Springsteen associated in there. I think did he like have a concert where he wore it as a cape or something? I
Yeah.
don't know. And Bon Jovi and every awesome artist who influenced music across the world had from America had an American flag most likely somewhere. Like Tom Petty. Oh my gosh. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So pop culture is infused with the American flag, especially to those who aren't from here, from in, in other countries across the world, I'd say, right? That's associated. To us, growing up in the country, being an American born and raised here, that my initial uh, flag sentiment was extremely warm. And I would think of the flag and I think of safety, I think of security, uh, I think of being extremely proud of where I'm from. I also think about my early history lessons of what it means and what it took to get that flag
So
and what we fought for, which
just
was,
so back then, the history that
yeah.
was taught, and this was the 80s, I would assume, in school, was all it was all very positive leaning, right? It didn't really bring up any. It was, very, very rah, go country, maybe. No.
No, so my education was, I'd say, pretty well rounded.
Yeah.
As far as, oh yeah, and especially at home. So I was watching the movie Glory at a very early age, for example.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that movie. It is extremely graphic depiction of the Civil War. And my mother was a staunch feminist, and my father was a physician, anti-pharma, and really didn't like the insurance companies. And so I was raised in a liberal household.
That's
Also
true.
grew up watching Sesame Street, and PBS and the shows that they aired were all about and Mr. Rogers. I mean,
Hmm.
everything was about we are all different and that's okay.
That's interesting. See, I don't
Look,
have any knowledge. It's so interesting because I have these little snapshots I can see of that culture from that time.
yeah.
And this is a lot of blind spots for me, I guess, but it's interesting.
Well, and now today in some schools, I know that it's different, but so we knew where the flag came from, how it was designed, and
Hmm.
the 13 colonies, and then the states and the stars. So the stars and the stripes, and then the Revolutionary War. That history lesson was, of course, always a favorite. So that one, in the depiction, of course, we were right in that case. There was no doubt about it. We didn't want a king. We didn't want to be taxed without representation. And then the other historical context, I mean, in my schools, we learned about Native Americans. We learned about what happened and what our role in
Yeah.
that. Oh, yeah. And then I did go to a liberal high school in Athens, Ohio. And so my teachers were giving us a profound worldview. I had the most intense history and government teacher you can
That's
imagine.
great.
So, yeah, so I was lucky and learned a lot. I think, though, I think most of us did back then. I mean, the Cold War you mentioned,
Hmm.
but we did have our own view in all of those lessons that we were on top, that we were the ones who were the moral compass
Right.
for the world.
So that exceptionalism was
Yeah.
kind of woven throughout.
Well, for sure. And then I think about the Challenger spaceship going up and watching that in school. And, we weren't perfect as a country, but we were all united. So for me, the flag, I always had it. I had it in so let's go to the 2000s, like 2010s.
Or you
I
want
had
to
the
go
flag.
2000s? I mean, 9/11 is kind of
Yeah,
a
9/11
big
happened.
milestone for the flag. I remember I was in Germany taking care of elderly people in my social year there, and I, was in the middle of like a tea party or something, and there was the towers falling on the TVs and everything that happened after that, and the rallying and the moment at that point, it seemed like the flag was kind of at the core as a uniting entity. I don't know if I'm seeing that correctly. I wasn't really there.
Yeah, it always has been. It's supposed to be the thing that unites us all. And so flash forward to today, and now we have right now an identity crisis for the American flag. So this is what we're calling it. In 2016, and leading up to that campaign, the Trump campaign and MAGA used the American flag to represent their party and
Mm,
their campaign. And they, from a marketing and branding standpoint, took it over and they aced it. They had the flag, and every politician always, has had that American flag backdrop. But but the way that the Trump campaign mastered that was
yeah,
actually, I think we all know that Trump is a brand expert. His brand is his
yeah,
brand.
yeah.
Um, and so they took the flag over. And so I think
Now, one
now
question I
today,
I
yeah.
do have on that is didn't the flag, if you think before Trump, y- you could argue that the flag has been used more closely with right-leaning type of initiatives and just culture and lifestyle than left-leaning. Like you think of like truck culture or
Hmm.
any of that, any of those types of hyper-masculine, type of hunting. Again, not really my world, but it just does seem it's more prevalent there. So I'm wondering if they tapped into that, or how do you see the correlation there?
That's a great question. For me personally, and I grew up in Ohio, which I think I've mentioned before about 20
Yeah.
times.
But there is a mixture there in Athens specifically because you have
Mhm.
faculty, right? And faculty families, which are very liberal. But then you also have your people that actually live there that from the farms and all the different rural areas surrounding it, which are way more, right leaning in a sense, right?
Yeah. Well, for me, just growing up, there was the American flag and the Confederate flag.
Right.
And the Confederate flag, which I remember going to a party in college and a kid had it in his bedroom there, and I was just astonished, and I threw a whole thing like, what? And I left the party. But to me, that was the far right, the Confederate
Right.
flag. And I know that for sure, like you'd see, and my husband has a Harley, so we ride. We are technically, I suppose you could call him a biker, but he does not fall under most of the bikers' political affiliation. But they had the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. They have that symbol, and yes, the American flag was there, but it was also everywhere else. So
Right. They
hanging,
had their own symbols that were kind of what you would call a sub brand or, some sort of their own little identifiers, like the snake on the yellow background or the MAGA hat itself, right, is red. It's the symbol itself. But
right.
yeah.
So there was. we had the flag was not owned by one entity, and I always had one hanging in our office, my agency office, at home. We'd have flags and different depictions. Like I had an old antique wooden flag right when you walk in the house. And then in 2020, when I ran for Congress actually and announced my race, my neighbors, and we've been extremely cordial with these guys, like very
Mm-hmm.
close with them. So we lived in an old farmhouse from the 1800s, and they would help us often, figuring they used to live there. She grew up in the house, and we were frequently seeing them and friends with them. I would
Mm-hmm.
have described them as we're extremely friendly. When I announced my congressional race and put the signs out in the yard, our neighbor who's older, I think he's in his late 70s, he came down to the bottom of the driveway, and his driveway is near ours, and he hung up a massive American flag.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a sign that he was saying, and he's a Republican,
Mm.
to the world, like, hey, she's running as a Democrat, but don't worry, don't associate our house with that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that was the first
Wow.
time where it was just I felt really
Othering,
I was
right?
offended. No, I was like, this is also my
Because it's like,
country.
yeah, right. It's like, oh
What
no,
is going on?
you don't get to exclude people here,
But and it was the way that he did that, you know? So
Yeah.
once they knew about the race, of course, they didn't donate. They didn't want to campaign with us. It was very clear that they felt they were like, no, we're not going to support you in this. And that's when the flag went up. And so we hung our own flag on the front door of our place, and we used the American flag during the campaign and all of our marketing. And my husband wears a cowboy hat, so people were very confused. But anyway, that was this moment where I was like, what is going on? If the nice neighbor is using this as a symbol of this is they're not, what is he trying to say? It's trying to say, you're not American. That's what they're trying to say. We're Americans. You're not
Yeah.
Americans. These
So
aren't American ideals.
they're the
Yeah.
arbiters of what is American, right? Which is
Right.
kind of at the core of it, right? Is that they get to decide, what is patriotic.
So we've got, and the situation we're in, like right at this moment. Now, 2024, I see the flag and I see it pop up, or as you see it hanging in front of a business. And the flag started to hang next to the Trump flags. The American flag, whenever you saw it, there was also a MAGA flag in someone's yard. And again, brilliant branding, great job. But meanwhile, the liberals, we are hanging up our rainbow flags and our love is love flags, right? But
Right.
we're often not also having the American flag there. And I don't think that was intentional. I just think we weren't as smart as the
Yeah.
MAGA campaign about
Yeah.
owning the flag.
It's brilliant if you think about it,
Mm.
because what they're doing is they're by adjacency, right? By showing things in close proximity. This is very much like branding, as you do co-branding scenarios and types of, endorsed
Mm.
type of, visualizations. So this is the same thing where you have, you associate them together. And if the liberals, and on the other side, also the fact that it's so disjointed, I mean, I think didn't help either, because there was not one unifying symbol in existence for the, progressive movement. So it just felt very scattered, and non-cohesive. So that didn't
Right.
help them in that sense either.
And so the Make America Great Again MAGA flags, the tagline, the acronym, the name, the memorability of the design with the blue version and the red version
Right.
and the hat being in the red. What do you think about the design and that brand ID?
I mean,
You wanna
it's very well crafted. It's very much on point. It tries to leverage and hijack, really, like any type of, credibility that you can get. You like the country, the national like vibe and culture, like all of those things, but then you add a slab serif font on there and you make it, really loud and obnoxious. Now you have that bold kind of badass mentality, which is also very quintessentially American. You won't find that in other countries. That idea of, truck nuts.
Right.
Kind of, I think, captures it best.
Oh my
But
God.
it's kind of in our bones, right? There's something about it that just runs really deep. So, exploiting it to that degree is remarkable.
So where do we go from here on the flag? How do we take ownership back? And I've got some comments though from our LinkedIn friends, and then Chris, you can answer
Yeah.
that
Yeah, it's
question.
interesting.
So I posted on LinkedIn a picture of Trump and Melania on a motorcycle, which is hilarious because he does not know how to drive a motorcycle. And they're covered in the American flag, and there's like all these guys behind him. It's an illustration. It's a painting by one of his fans, and they're at the Capitol and they're taking it over. And I put it on LinkedIn and I said, we're facing an identity crisis with the flag. What did the flag mean to you when you were a kid? And what does it mean to you now? And there were hundreds of comments.
Hmm.
Here are a few of them. Stephanie said, it used to feel like a symbol of pride, unity, and safety. Now I am immediately triggered by the sight of it, as
Hmm.
MAGA and conservative cultists more often weaponize it to harm our own people. Larry says, I find it disheartening and frankly disrespectful when people display the flag to signal their patriotism but seem unaware of the U.S. flag code, often mishandling or even decorating it in the process. So,
Because there are all those blue life matters with the line through it, and there's a couple variations where they, just basically put their own spin on it, right?
right, absolutely. And then let's see. Um, This person says, I went from loving flying the flag to never wanting to. Why? Because it used to represent democracy and freedom, and now it represents hate and stupidity. I
It's
got rid of
sad.
all of my red, white, and blue clothing too. Off to Goodwill with any flag related stuff.
Oof.
Please realize my dad was a 20-year U.S. Navy vet, and I was the guy putting out the flag on every holiday. Plus, on Memorial Day for the last 18 years, I took my family to the nearest national cemetery to lay yellow flowers on gravestones so my kids would know freedom is not free. That's the same person who said that they've thrown everything away to Goodwill.
Wow.
Yeah. So this person, Dion, says it all changed under Trump 1.0, and now it's worse than ever. I just can't see how I would fly the flag today. It sends the wrong message. Um, let's see. And there were other people who have and still hang their flag. So they're the folks who are coming into the comments and saying, I still hang my flag. Of course I hang my flag. I'll always hang my flag. But when I asked, well, do you support Trump? There were crickets. So this is the disconnect.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
find well, there was one woman who still has her flag room in her house, and she is anti-MAGA, and she loves the flag. She absolutely loves it. So it was a mixed bag, but all in all, overwhelmingly, it's not something that we're imagining. The flag has been taken by the MAGA movement. So where do we go from here, Chris, as far as
Well,
our identity?
well, here's another thought that just to consider, and I can offer because of my unique background. And a little story is my little downtown here has flags up everywhere all the time, and it's up and down High Street, right? And it's just hundreds of them. They're all American flags. It makes me personally, and I know I'm wearing this blazer right now is kind of a joke, but to me, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And the reason it does is because I grew up in a country that suffered from like this huge nationalistic, fascistic, is that a word? But it's this, the National Socialism that happened there. And it was all very much drenched in nationalism and patriotism and all that. So when I was taught in school, like, you don't fly the flag, you kind of keep it down a little
And
bit,
this is
right?
post World War II in Germany, though,
Yeah, this is
right?
post
So that's
World War
why
II in Germany in the
yeah.
80s and 90s. And I know, and because I grew up in two cultures, I am I have affinities to both, and I'm not like, it's that whole like tribalism that comes along with it that I have a problem with. So I don't know. I think the idea of just generally just kind of taking the gas off the patriotism in general and just kind of just little less spectacle, is kind of my opinion, which is probably controversial too.
No,
But
I
yeah.
mean, if depending on where this heads, I think, and we might have to take a break from the flags everywhere in Main Street America all the time. We might, again, depending on how this wraps up, because we don't know how it will end. And we've seen what happens when we tried to get Trump out after his first term. So it could get really ugly, and we might need a huge break. And and that's what Germany needed to do, right? And
Yeah. When
right
they made a new
now,
flag,
yeah,
it's an interesting background because Germany as a country didn't actually exist that long. It was really formed in the late 1800s under Kaiser Wilhelm. So before it was all these individual little fiefdoms and baronships or whatever you call it.
you
And
guys have like 1,000 castles
right. And
because
that's
of
why
all
one of
the
the
little.
reasons when the Nazis took over, Germans weren't that concerned. There wasn't that much of an outcry because the little fiefdoms have been taken over every other day, so they were kind of switching nationalities every other week, which is hyperbolic, but you get the point. So America has much more like a much deeper, much more
Yeah, it's everything. The flag
it's
is
a
everything
much
to
more
us.
passionate, and it's great in that regard. And it means that you know what it stands for. And when something like what's happening right now is happening, you can stand up and say, nah, this is what it stands for. And in Germany, I don't think we're really able to do that. Anyway, it's a theory of mine, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So and Americans, when we've been divided in the past, and people have been leaving these in the LinkedIn post in the comments, historical references here in the U.S. about
Hmm.
how the flag was used during the civil rights movement and during the anti-Vietnam War protests, et cetera. So this is not the first time, and you're right that the flag in those instances was used on who we would say were the wrong side of those fights, historically speaking. They were on the wrong side, and owning that flag, but yet still, here we are today, and the same thing's happening. So how many kicks does it take? It will be always our flag. I can't imagine not having it. I think if we lose our representation and our democracy as we understand it, though, that a new regime or new whatever, that they would need to create a new flag. And for any flag, you need a majority of the people in the country to be united by it.
Could you
And
imagine?
so what?
It sounds so crazy when you talk about it, but it's happened in the past. It's what happened, before. And you thinking about a flag itself as kind of the manifestation of that is kind of nuts.
Yeah, and what horrifies me as an American and as a patriot and as somebody who loves this country, and I will die for this country if I have to, what scares me is that our good name is being wrecked, and that a child in a different country anywhere in the world might see it, and when they and see it and think something else now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right now we have camps filled with immigrants overflowing. They're not getting showers, they're not getting fed. I mean, these are the equivalent of concentration camps on our soil. So in Germany, the Nazis had their own symbol, and then there was the German flag, right?
Yeah. And I would
So,
have to go back exactly to see because I think there are origins in it. But they did. I mean, the Nazis had their own party flag, and
mhm.
that the swastika, white circle with the red background, and that was such a powerful symbol. And Hitler himself was just such a talented designer, and I shouldn't put that in one sentence, but it's the truth. It's like everything was in lockstep. Everything like was following the brand guidelines to a T. There was nothing out of step. So it just was this incredible force of visual
Mm,
identity. You know,
MAGA, they're taking our flag, which does not stand for what they stand for.
right.
I mean, for
That's the thing,
most
isn't
of
it?
us, yeah.
There's ways you could approach this, right? I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, you take the flag and you co-opt it similarly. But again, I think to that one comment that you mentioned, that's disrespectful in itself, right? The flag stands for something bigger than just this single moment in time or an idea. So adjacency would, just you could argue you could just start showing more adjacencies, So like you have a symbol like the rainbow flag, but you have it always in adjacency with American flag, and you just try to reinforce that. Perhaps there's a way you can get it back.
Yeah. So this is a great takeaway. So, hang the American flag next to other symbolic statements and flags. I was searching for one and I couldn't find it, Chris. So I think we need to design one
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I love the rainbow flag and I love the Black Lives Matter flag. Those are they're huge issues, but they're smaller than the big picture that I'm trying to vocalize, right? Do you
So
know what
what's
I mean? Like,
interesting, I'd had something actually. This is.
yeah.
I'm just remembering when Trump ran the first time. I designed a yard sign for my brother-in-law actually originally, but then we made a bunch of them, and it's co-opting Captain America, just because like it's the idea of Captain America with his shield breaking through fascism, um, with the way of reclaiming that patriotism to something that's anti-fascist, right? Because at the time, this was when Antifa was like deemed a terrorist group and unpatriotic. And that's that same thing that you're talking about, right? Where they want to
Yeah.
other them and they want to say, these are not Americans, we're Americans. So having Captain America as a symbol of anti-fascism, I thought was pretty great. And
That's
what's
a
more
cool
American
flag. I've
than,
seen it, but it is complex. I'm looking
oh,
for
yeah,
a
it doesn't read in a
very
second for sure.
simple image of unity and the United States and what we stand for.
Hmm.
So I think we could create one. And the other thing too is I wish the MAGA folks would wear some kind of a symbol so that I know who they are. I don't think it's really fair. If you're trying to come and get a lot of us, show yourself. And this whole wearing the masks, the fake ice
Yeah, that's
people,
the Gestapo all over. It's
it is
chilling.
horrifying. And they are dressed like our law enforcement.
Yeah.
It,
That's not good. That's why if you see like what happened in LA where normal people were starting to like push back and there was just like you could feel the upswelling. Like I don't know.
mhm. So we if anybody has one, if you're listening to this, if you found a symbol, again, like I could have a rainbow flag, a Black Lives Matter flag, but I want one that encompasses all of the issues that we are fighting for.
One thing that I
Yeah.
really liked, I don't know if you've ever seen any of Oat Studios short movies on YouTube. This is very nerdy. But it's a short movie called Raka from Neil Blomkamp, and it's about aliens taking over Earth. Sigourney Weaver's in it, but they have a flag. This is get to the point.
The aliens? The
No,
aliens
not
have a
the
flag?
aliens, the
Oh,
humans. So the humans have a flag, and basically it's Da Vinci's, guy in the circle square. I don't know if you're familiar with that
yeah, I'm
visualization,
familiar with that one.
which I really like. Just for me personally, I like the idea
Okay.
of it represents solidarity. Now you could argue it's a white guy in there, so that's probably not good. But the idea that it represents solidarity, but that might be very personal.
Yeah, I think we would need a very simple symbol and flag that represents our nationality and where we want to go.
Yeah,
So
I
where
think
would
adjacency is the key, though. I like the idea
adjacencies? Okay.
of not messing with the American flag and
Yeah,
having something that
absolutely.
lives well next to it. Maybe that's part of the criteria. It has to
Yeah.
look like it works with it. So maybe the trick is figuring out what you want to leverage and tap into, and how do you want to represent the more progressive, inclusive, caring aspects that we represent.
So is that a project? That's a
Yeah,
project.
I think it's a project.
Yeah, we need to
Let's
design
do it.
something. Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been really, really fun to unpack. And also, I know I realize there's the undercurrent of how depressing it is that we're even talking about this, but it's important. I think if I'd love to hear from all of you if you've, heard this and what your feelings are. But a takeaway for me is to find a way in which we can hang the flag and make sure everyone who sees it has an adjacent symbol knowing what it means to
Yeah.
us.
And
Yes.
personally, like, I want it to be like back in the day in the 90s when I would watch my action movies and be like, wow, this is a great place. I want to go there. Like that feeling. And then I went there and I've been living here for 20 years. Like I want that back.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll have to see how all that plays out. So thank you for joining us on this episode, everyone. And coming up, we are interviewing Michael Slaby, who worked on President Obama's '08 campaign. He was their digital director. So we're going to hear from him on a lot of action steps that all of us can take right now to help save and preserve our democracy. So
It's exciting.
until then, yeah, I'm really excited. Until then, we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Citizen Rebel. If you like this episode, subscribe to the show and share it with a friend.
To connect with us and find more content like this, visit goodisnow.com.